Welcome back to Cards and Comics. Today I have my top 10 vintage sports card sales on eBay for February 2023. This is all sports and it's only buy nows and auctions because that's easier for me to track. It's how I do it, so we'll get right into it. First up is a PSA 8 1969 Topps Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Lew Alcindor card. Now, this card was sold on the 14th as well, so I'll talk about that. There is some duplication on the list this month, which is kind of to be expected, how the hobby kind of works. This sold on the 22nd with 101 bids, so this was not a buy now. And the first thing I always look at is pop counts. So 170 PSA 8s, not rare, but it's not easy to get. So it's in that middle slot of harder to get than, let's say, a lot of cards, but it's not rare. Rare is usually for cards in the PSA 8 grade below 100. So this is hard to get, but not rare. There's 17 nines, which is, a good number, a good number of nines, meaning that it's hard to get, but with 17 of them out there, they'll come up once in a while. 210, so it's not a zero. A lot of cards in the 60s and 70s and 50s have 0 10s. So there's 2 of those. Now, this card brought an all-time high of $80,000 on April 18th, 2021. And it was a PWCC auction. However, that's a pretty massive fall from, of $60,000. Now, to put that in perspective, though, in 2020, this card basically went from $9,000 to $25,000, between July 5th and July 31st. And once it hit $25,000, it hasn't really gone below $20,000 since. So the card essentially, went up, by, more than double in basically less than a month, and then it held that value. Now it's gone up to $80,000 and back down to $23,000, but it just shows that if you bought the card prior to 2020, you made a lot of money. If you bought it at the peak of 2021, you're in it for a massive loss. And that's a very common thing with cards during the pandemic. So just kind of proves out that there was a time to buy these kind of cards and a time not to. And it's very clear what those time periods are. Moving on to number 9. Now, this is a card that's going to appear multiple times on this list, which is specifically the PSA 1 52 Topps Mickey Mantle. We'll talk about why some of these cards sell for different prices. This one sold for $23,000 or $23,099 on the 25th. 67 bids, pretty intense auction here. And it's again one of 3 PSA 1s that sold in February. Now, the pop count for the 52 Topps Mantle is about 19,000 cards, right? With 327 ones. So what I'm trying to point out here is that, yes, this card is super high in demand. Not going to diss that. What I am going to say is that there is more graded than most people think. The card isn't a super short print. It's not like there's only 20 or 30 PSA 1s and, 2 or 3 8s and 1 9 out there. No, this card has some volume. It's not a super short print. A lot of people talk about the cards being dumped in the ocean. A lot of things out there about this card that I think are a little bit stories out there that aren't 100% true. So I just want to say that there is a good volume of PSA 1s, 327. Even though the card is super expensive, it's still obtainable, right? Because 3 of them sold in February alone on eBay. Which you would think that most of these cards have moved to big auction houses. We talked about that before, is how a lot of these cards have just moved to auction houses. Now, the all-time high for this card was last September, where one sold for $60,000. However, that card was kind of special, and this is what I want to get into with this card is that sometimes cards like this, a PSA 1, which obviously have damage, there's certain types of cards like this that will sell for a lot of money. Now, this card was taped. So what that means is that it had 4 corners that were taped, but the rest of the card was basically perfect. So when you got rid of the tape, the residue was still there. PSA gave it a 1, but overall, outside of the tape, the card was very, very nice. So people really like cards like that. The other one that people will go for big time is cards that were pasted into binders to where the back of the card is pretty much damaged pretty badly, a lot of paper loss, but the front looks amazing. Those cards will do very well in auction because, again, most people care about the front, and if the front looks perfect and the back is all damaged and missing paper, that is actually what a lot of these PSA 1 collectors look for, is cards that have good fronts with horrific packs. And those will do very well in auction. Compared to a card like this, which looks like someone took sandpaper to, and it's not very visually appealing. It's got wax in the back. It's pretty well rounded. It's got a giant crease, missing paper. It's just got a lot of things wrong with it, right? So this is what you typically think of as a PSA 1. Now, the visual appeal, again, matters tremendously. Now, this isn't the worst copy that sold in the PSA 1. So even with all the visual flaws, there was one even worse than this one that sold. So whoever bought this one actually got kind of a good deal because they got kind of the second best copy or the second worst copy that sold on eBay in February. So to me, I think this one at least still has the presence of a nice looking card, and the wear and everything is very even. So if I'm going to buy a card like this as a 1, 2, or 3, I'm going to look for consistent wear across all corners. I don't want one that's like missing a corner, or where the face is whited out, or someone drew a mustache on him. Things like that are so visually distracting that it makes the card, to me, worth a lot less. This card is just very, very even wear, and the front has some paper loss, missing some of the color, but it's very even across the card. So it's not just concentrated on his face or the name or something where it's very distracting. So second best copy that sold in February. Now number 8, back to Lew Alcindor, back to Cream. So this is the other card that sold by Probstein, again by auction, and again. The one thing I want to talk about this card is that, remember when I talked about that big PWCC card that sold for $80,000? Well, this is it. This card, this exact copy, sold for $80,000 on 3/17/21. Now, a few cards did sell around that price point of $80,000. So it didn't just sell once for $80,000. It sold, I think, 2 or 3 times. But this is one of the cards that sold for that big price point. And it's a little off center, like most cards are, but it's pretty nice. But again, this card sold for $70,000 or more 6 times between February and April of 21. So again, this is not the only time this card sold for that much, but it just shows that this card went from $80,000 to 24. Pretty big hit for whoever bought and sold this card. I'm hoping that the person didn't, lose that much money, hoping that the card would keep going up, or this was an investment gone wrong. Hopefully the person just liked, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, bought the card, and then decided to sell it to buy other cards, and didn't, eat the big loss, and, get out of the card business, or think that this is just a terrible hobby because of losing this much money. Again, there was a good time to buy and a bad time, and in 2021, this was not a great time to be buying into the card market because everything was at peak pricing for the most part, and you can see it here. This exact card lost $60,000 in basically, a year and a half, 2 years. So very tough for the person who sold this card. Next up is a card that I'm just going to talk about. A lot of wish casting with this card. Sold on the 21st, 55 bids. The card is advertised as raw, VG condition, but it looks much higher. So this is all kinds of red flags. First off, this card would have to grade a PSA 5 to make it worth, the money paid. So right off the bat, the person who bought this card is overvaluing it because it's listed as a VG condition. So there could be condition issues that you can't tell in the photos. And if it does grade a 3, it's not worth what the person paid. Again, it'd have to grade a PSA 5 to get the average VC price close to what the person paid for. Secondly, that it looks way too good for the grade it's listed at. That's a huge red flag, guys. Most people that are honest in the hobby will list cards close to the grade it is. You're not going to list a 51 Bowman Mantle that looks like a PSA 8, or at least a 7, as a VG3, right? Because A, it doesn't look like that. It looks much nicer. B, you want to make the most money for your card, so you're going to list it at the right grade. But C, most people would not ever keep a card like this ungraded because you're just missing out on so much money. So that's another red flag. A, the person listed it as a VG card, which looks much lower grade than it really is. B, the card should be graded. Anyone in this hobby now knows that you should grade cards like this. So this being ungraded is a big red flag. But the biggest red flag of all red flags is this card looks like it was just printed. The tone, the printing, the brightness of it, everything on this card screams like it just got made yesterday. So, is someone taking a flyer at $26,000 roughly that this card is real and that they'll get a PSA 7 on it and make a lot of money? Yes. Someone is wish casting very hard. And do I hope they win? So part of me says yes, because obviously we always love that story. But part of me says no, because this is what encourages people to keep doing this thing over and over, which is selling reprints, making their own version of these reprints and selling them over and over and over, and trying to get one person to bid on the card or to fool people into thinking that they're getting something that is going to make them a lot of money and it's going to be a fake. It just is not good for the hobby for this thing to happen so often. And it just shows the mentality of the hobbyist, which is, I'm smarter than you. I think it's real. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to grade it and make a bunch of money. And then I'm going to go on Instagram and make fun of everyone who passed over this great deal, right? That is some mindset for some folks in the hobby. Now, a lot of people like me that are very risk adverse would just say, there's no way this is real. I think the odds of this being not real is so much higher than it being real that I'm never going to buy a card like this. The one time out of whatever that this is real, that person gets to run laps and do their home run dance, fine. But I don't think this is real. You let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think this is a real card? Do you think this is something that you would buy? I think this is definitely a trap. Number 6, Babe Ruth 33. The good old number 53. The yellow Ruth. Now, I love the yellow Ruth. I like the red Ruth as well. They're my two top Ruth cards I would want to have. I have the red one. I don't have the yellow one, so I'm a little bit jelly of this card. 2.5. Again, pop count for this card, 1155. So, this card is available. There's 47 2.5s and 154 3s, so there is some quantity out there if you want to look at getting a card like this. Now, the thing that was interesting about this card is sold for $28,150, $28,150, which pretty much is the highest it's ever sold for in this condition. Now, it definitely presents higher than the grade it is. And what I mean by that is the card itself has a great image. Not a lot of toning, very even wear in the corners, bright color. Back is clean. So to me, a lot of people are would say this card is presents very much nicer than the grade. Now, you could have bought a 4 The average VCB price is $28.8. So this is where you have to kind of look at, is this card so nice that it's worth 1.5 more, basically on average grade than from a price point than it currently is. Can you find fours as nice or nicer than this card? Yeah, you can. Will those fours in this kind of condition bring more money than 28? They could. So it's hard for me to tell this person that you shouldn't have bought this card because you could have got a 4 for the same price. The argument's always going to be is that 4 may not be as nice as this card from a visual presentation perspective or eye appeal. So I understand that. I would just say if I'm in the market for this card, I'm going to be looking, if I'm going to pay $28,000, I know a 4 goes for about that price. I'm going to be looking for a 3 and a 4 that's really nice. And if I can't find one as nice, would I accept the 2.5? Maybe. I would have. So this is something that I see as understandable, but it makes it hard when you go to resell it again. I'm going to just say most dealers and most people looking at pricing are not going to want to give you all-time high pricing for a card that probably averages, closer to $14,000 to $16,000. They're going to be like, well, you just overpaid. The card's nice, you overpaid. I'm not going to give you that much money for it. Considering that PSA 4 goes for about the same price, I think it makes the resale version of this card harder, unless you find someone who just loves the card as much as you, which is true. It could be another collector to collector sale. You might get it. So this is what things I look at when I buy cards is just, hey, if you love the card and you think it's worth it, I'm all for it. But you just know that when it's time to resell that card, if you end up doing it anytime soon, it may be a problem for you. Now, if you hold the card 10 to 20 years, it doesn't matter. It's going to go up, So if you hold the card, it's definitely a good deal. Number 5, another PSA 1. Now, all the numbers are the same, and this is sold for $28.5, so sold higher than the first one. This is definitely, to me, the worst of the cards. And the reason I say that is because it has a lot of face rub, visible creases, and to me, it's somewhat similar in terms of that face rub, but it looks like to me that squareness of his face, it looks like maybe the gum or the wax bled through the card. But if you look at that squareness around his face, that's either the telltale signs of gum, the gum on the card, or the wax on the back of the pack, which you can see the wax clearly, or a gum stain, it went through the card. And that is very common for that time period. So if you add a little heat, if you add a little bit of time, the gum in these products can melt into the cards, can go through the cardboard and stain both sides. So that's what this card looks like to me. I do not like that at all. I think that makes the card a lot more damage than the previous card, which was just normal wear from being old and not being handled properly. As well, this is definitely a card that came out of the pack looking bad, and it was treated badly afterwards to get all the wear on the edges. But I just don't like the damage on this card as much as the first one. And again, I just I think whoever bought the first card got a better deal. And I think that was, there was a big enough difference in price that I would have, much rather had the first one. Now, some people might, excuse me, look at this card and say, but it's got some nicer corners. Outside of that big wax stain, the blue's nicer. It's a little bit brighter color. That's fine if that's what you think, but to me, that clear damage in the middle of that card, which came, again, I think from either the gum or the wax, to me is so visually unappealing. I would not want this card compared to the first one. I don't have this card at all, so I would take this card. Don't get me wrong. If I was offered it, this is still a PSA 1 Mantle, still worth a lot of money. I just don't like it as much as the other two that sold this month. And speaking of the devil, here's the one I think was the best. And the reason why is clearly this card, which sold just for $100 more than the prior card, doesn't have damage from wax or the gum from front to back. The back is clean. I know a lot of people hate backs, and you got the back, people who don't care about the back, but it definitely makes the card, from a technical grade perspective, much better when you don't have all that damage and all that staining on the back. The front has great color, no sandpaper effect. You just got honest creasing. And the corners still have some sharpness to them. So to me, it's clearly the best because it has the best color, no sandpaper, no wax damage on the back, no front to back damage. So this card, to me, I would have paid the most for this card of all three. And I would have been much happier with this card from a technical grade perspective. I think you could make an argument that this card is undergraded, given the fact that you saw the prior two cards being so much more heavily damaged. In this card, I would much rather have this card by far. It's clearly the best PSA 1 of the three that sold. The fact that the guy only paid $100 more than this card versus this card, I just feel like, the comparison is just not even the same ballpark. Which just also shows you that the range of PSA 1 cards in the world is tremendous. So this card should have a lot of dollar swing just because the difference in PSA 1 condition can be tremendous. The breadth and scope of those differences is here to here pretty tremendous. So no wonder there is sometimes some different, massive difference in prices in the PSA 1s. But again, this one to me is clearly the best one. And whoever bought it got a great deal. To me, this was the buy of the month for February. Next up is a great, and I mean it, great SGC 4.5 33 Ruth. This card not only has perfect registration, great color, but the corners are almost square across the board. I'm assuming that there's a crease somewhere in the card to get the 4.5 grade. I don't see paper loss in the back. And whoever bought it paid $45,000 on it buy it now. The previous high for this grade for this card was a year ago, basically, April 1st, 2021. For $30,000. So this card blew it away by $15,000. And again, some just other sales. A PSA 4 on Heritage brought $24,000. A 4.5 brought $30,600 last November, and a PSA 5 brought $51,000 in December of 2022. So those are some recent sales of similar graded condition cards from PSA, just showing you how strong a sale this was. I just believe the person who bought this card loved it, thought it was undergraded, thought it was a PSA 5, and thought he got a good deal. And I can't really argue with the guy. Whoever bought it, or girl, whoever bought this card, truly thinks that this card is undergraded or could be a PSA 5 if crossed over, and feels like the card's a $50,000 card they paid $45,000 for. So that's, a good deal. Now, if the card grades a 4 from PSA, it's closer to a $25,000 to $30,000 card, and they lost money. This is the game you play. Now, if you're just a collector and buying this card for your collection, and you think this is the nicest condition card you can afford, and obviously we're talking a lot of money, then this card is amazing. It's a great card, no matter what. No matter if it grades cross over to 5, if you never cross it over, whatever it is, it's a great card. Whoever bought it, I would love to own this card. This is definitely a beautiful card, but it's definitely brought a lot of money and some record sales for this grade in SGC. So whoever bought it did pay the most ever for this condition of card from SGC. So that's a beautiful card. Number 2. Now, this is an interesting card, 63 Mantle PSA 9. I would just say this. It brought $50,000. Okay. Auction, 31 bids on the 9th. The previous high was last April for $90,000. Now I've looked at that card. That card sold by REA is tremendous. it's a beautiful, beautiful 9. And one just sold in February of this year on PWCC Premier Auctions, which again, I'm just doing eBay, sold for $55,000. So this one actually sold under what the one that sold on PWCC's recent Premier Auction. So why did it sell for $5,000 less? Well, I think it's obviously a card that has some issues. It's a 9, but you can clearly see print on the green. You can see it's a little bit angle cut and off center, and the back is off center as well. So it's got 3 pretty obvious condition issues: print dots, off center front, off center back. So that means to me that the REA card, which is beautiful, perfectly centered, what you would think of as a 9, this card to me is not a great 9, even though I technically, again, grade wise, you could say it's a 9. You can definitely see no chipping in the corners. But the fact that the person took the photo at a weird angle, and I cropped it down. The photo actually was much smaller in the listing because of how it wasn't cropped. It's just not how I would list my $50,000 card on eBay if I was going to sell it. So that sometimes when I look at these kind of auctions and the person who lists the auction like this, a $50,000 card without a really nice scan or a photo of it, kind of shot from way far away, it just shows to me that they don't really care how much it's sold for. They were just probably freeing up some cash to buy something else. So from that perspective, this card deserved probably not to sell at the highest price ever because A, wasn't a high-end 9. It's a very mediocre to low-end 9, in my opinion. And it's got some terrible photos in the auction for someone to judge the condition. So that's sort of what you get. So it doesn't surprise me this card's undersold compared to the last sale of $55,000. Obviously, it's still a nice card. I'm not saying here and saying like it's a 6 or 7, but it's not a high-end 9. And based on prior sales and based on the kind of photos and everything, it probably sold where it probably should have. Now, last but not least, is a 52 Topps PSA 7 number 1. So this is PSA 7, the highest selling card by auction and by now on that I could find on eBay from February. $60,500. Now, the last time the card sold was at that VCP tracked was Lelands in February of this year for $41,000. So this card outsold that card by basically $19,000. That's a huge difference in sales. Now, I say if sale is real, it outsold the highest amount ever by close to $20,000. The reason I say is if it's real or not is A, that's a massive difference in price. B, it's not quite in the VCP database yet. That could be, that maybe they don't think it's real. And C is that it's not high end. It's there's obvious centering issues, and this is common for the card, but for the card to sell at the highest price point ever by $20,000, you would think it would be well centered. Like that would be the one card that you would say a centered PSA 7 Maze should sell much higher than a normal Maze card, like $20,000 more. But this card isn't it. This is not the card that you would say would obviously sell for more than all other 7s. It doesn't have a lot of attributes I would say make it high end. Now, it's got 102 cards in the pop count. So again, it's real close to that rarefied 100 card, rare short print type card. Now, the 8s and 9s definitely fall into that category. So a PSA 8 in this card definitely is a premium card due to the short print nature. The 7 is close, so I can see why, especially a centered copy, would bring a lot of money. But this card isn't that that card. So I'm a little perplexed as to why it brought that much. I'm also it's not listed on VCP at the time I made the video. So are they kind of doubting the sale as well? Could be, when the reason it's not listed. Again, but we just want to ground ourselves in how Mays is undervalued is that the PSA 3 Mantle version of this card would sell for $67,000 on average. So a PSA 7 Mays card, which has basically a pop count of about 100, would still be outsold by a PSA 3 Mantle of the same card. Mays still has a lot of room to gain on Mantle in terms of value, and I think this just is one of those examples where you can clearly see that even though this card, highest ever sold, not even close to what a 7 Mantle would bring, and again, would sell for about what a PSA 3 Mantle would go for. So that's it, guys. That is my top 10 vintage card sales on eBay for February 2023. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if there's some cards I missed, some sales that you think should have been on the list, and I'll talk to you next time on Cards and Comics. Bye.